terms of some of the statements that were in there for sure.
Yeah, you bet. Oh, we should be just, I don't know where the chair, where's the chair, David?
All right, good afternoon, everyone. We will call this meeting of the Community Safety Standing Policy Committee, Thursday, May 11th, to order. The City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people, past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The City of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Mr. City Clerk, could I please have you do a roll call?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Deputy Mayor Parker.
Acting Mayor here, thank you.
Councillor Campbell.
Je suis ici maintenant.
Councillor Palladino.
Holidays.
Present. Chair Schmidt-Rempel.
Here.
And also in attendance is Councillor Middleton Hope.
That'd be Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much, everyone. First up, we have adoption of the agenda from Councillor Campbell. Adoption of the agenda, that the agenda of the Community Safety Standing Policy Committee meeting on May 11th, 2023 be adopted as presented. Councillor Campbell.
Has there been any changes to the agenda that we're aware of?
None.
Call the question.
Called. All in favor? Thank you very much. Next up is the consent agenda from Acting Mayor Parker. Be it resolved that the minutes of the Community Safety Standing Policy Committee meeting held on April 14th, 2023 be approved and the Chair and City Clerk be authorized to sign the same. Acting Mayor Parker.
I would call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? And that passes. Thank you very much. We have no presentations today, so we do have a submission from Luke Palmer, Emergency Preparedness Manager, regarding the 2023 Spring Hazard Outlook. Now, this is a submission, so there is no presentation to go along with it. But Mr. Palmer, is there anything out of this submission that you would like to highlight for us?
Thank you, Councillor Schmidt-Rempel. I do just want to start with a couple things, just paramount, of course, what we're experiencing in northern and central Alberta at this point. I can share that this is the worst or most impactful start to a wildfire season since 1906. So from our perspective, of course, we've had precipitation ongoing in the south this past week, but I'd really like to reiterate some of the components within this hazard outlook that talk about wildfire season, where our standard season starts later in the summer months, July and August. We're going to be using this as a learning opportunity to kind of gauge what our hazard assessment is going forward. But I do want to share that this remains, or wildfire remains to be our #1 threat in the city. And of course, with what's going on in the north, it's a great opportunity to learn, but also be prepared for what might be coming for us. Additionally, my second point would just be, whether it's ironic or not, or for a benefit, it is also Emergency Preparedness Week. So taking this opportunity to encourage Albertans to make habits every day in terms of being prepared. That could be buying an extra can of beans to throw in your kit at the grocery store your next trip, or anything like that. But that's our messaging this week. And of course, we've got events to focus people on emergency preparedness. But again, that's kind of our main points at this point. Other than that, we're happy to speak on questions specific to the Outlook report submitted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Palmer. Councillor Campbell.
Just while you're there, I was just wondering, when you're talking about learning from your experience up there, have you learned something yet? Like, what are you finding that you're saying, this is different, or anything like that?
Just the impact of the wildfire season. It's a little bit different, and again, it's something that hasn't happened in over 100 years. And even with Fort McMurray, it's the sheer quantity of fires this year is astounding in some ways and concerning in others. We also are aware that we've had 3 winters of La Nina, which has now faded across the Pacific. So we're right now moving into a neutral position in terms of ocean flow and how climate is going to impact us. And we know El Nino is coming later in the fall. So we're already kind of seeing the impacts of that transition out of La Nina, and we know El Nino isn't even here yet. So what impacts the south most is that change in terms of the jet stream, in terms of oceans and everything else. So what we're seeing here is yeah, in tandem with what we could experience in terms of just the transition with the way climate's going to be this year.
Are there Lethbridge firemen helping out right now?
I can share that we have a crew of 4 Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services deployed this way as well. They're also in Drayton Valley. They arrived, I believe, either yesterday or Tuesday. I apologize. I'm trying to remember what day it is today. And they are assisting basically on the southeast corner where ground zero basically happened and this fire started, and their help is very much valued and appreciated. I also can share that we have 3 city staff, including myself, that are occupying positions in the incident command post, basically tasked with coordinating and pre-planning for the crews on the ground. So what happens right now is that IMT team in the incident command post, by way of positions, under myself, we get the plans together and we give it to the crews in the morning so they know exactly what to do. So it's a 2-pronged effort between city staff in terms of supporting tactics and also employing tactics.
And finally, to what degree of control do you have right now of that situation up there?
I can't speak to any percentages of containment or anything else like that. I can share that we are in a good spot where the fire risk itself is decreasing substantially. The next task for this group, this community itself, not necessarily us, but is reentry of their evacuated individuals. And that is the reason that they're not able to go home right now is they don't have community lifelines. The hospital is not activated. Financial institutions aren't operational. Grocery stores are going to need to be restocked. So until we right now are leading that, but until the community can get that online, it's going to be a little bit of a haul for these people. So it's going to be drawn out, but we're certainly making a lot of good headway with a great team.
Great, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Deputy Mayor Middleton Hope.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a question to Mr. Palmer. Look, are you there as a result of your involvement with any provincial body, or were you requested to attend through the city as a result of your role here in Lethbridge?
And that's a great question, because I think it again will outline kind of how the emergency management continuum works in the province and what we can expect if we were to encounter something like this. Ultimately, every incident starts at the local level. When local resources become tapped out, they work themselves up the continuum. In 2018, the province rolled out an initiative that they're calling the All Hazards Incident Management Team. So basically, in all 5 regions in the province, they have a grant-funded team, which is trained by the province and able to deploy, and that's what I belong to. So in the South Zone, I'm one of the team leads just because so Medicine Hat is the steward of the grant, and we're co-signatories on there. So myself and my counterpart from Medicine Hat are the team leads for this group. We've got about 60 different individuals on this team from about 40 different agencies and communities across the South Zone. So it's a mixture of City of Lethbridge employees, MD of Taber, Town of Coaldale, AHS, anything in between. And this group is kind of next up. And we've deployed out a region which is very out of character. Normally we would deploy to a different community in the south who may be inundated. But just again, that speaks to what's actually happening up here is all 5 teams are basically being pulled wherever they can. And again, this is fully supported by the province through grant funding, training, deployment guidelines, and everything else. In the event these teams become tapped, which obviously we're trying to plan for in terms of continuity, and by we I mean the province, just because they are the stewards of these teams, that's when we would probably either tap on the federal government or more municipal emergency employees like myself. These individuals on the team have to meet a specific training regimen. So, and again, that's all provided by the province. So it's a very robust program that is now in its 5th year, and this is probably its busiest year yet. This is the South team's actual first deployment of any kind.
In terms of our region or specifically in the city, where do you feel that we are most vulnerable? Would it be the west side and or the River Valley? And if that is the case, what are we doing to prepare for an eventuality?
Yeah, and it's something we need to update in terms of the actual hazard risk vulnerability assessment for the city. In my opinion, though, it is the west side. It's the natural vegetation that's over there. It's the cottonwoods that are over there. It's the exposure to the high wind speeds that predominantly do come from the west and southwest. So
Yeah.
we do know that if there is an ignition of some sort, there's a lot of fuel and there's a lot of climate derivatives that will make that probably a little bit more susceptible. And again, the west side is just so open at the same time. Some of the things that we've talked about, and there's grant opportunities in terms of mitigation. We could make a fire break on the west side, which would basically be a pathway that runs the entire stretch from West Highlands all the way down to Sunridge, for instance. It would have a concrete barrier wall on the inside of that, so you'd have the path on the outside, which creates a defensible space for the fire department to access those areas that they can't get to. And then that cement wall would serve as a fire break at the same time. Not only is it an emergency mitigation kind of idea that we have, but it also kind of promotes a wellness for the community. There's access to all the businesses all the way from the south end to the north end at the same time. So it would be a two-pronged effort where it's mitigating a risk, not eliminating it, but also promoting community well-being. And that's kind of the one that we'd like to see and everything else. And we do have a report from 2017 that basically details the high-risk areas along the coulee. And to your point earlier, Councillor Chief Middleton or Middleton Hope, when we talk about that coulee edge, the canyons is a great example. It's the upper ridges, and there's some areas in Riverstone, and when we get into the other areas, and again, it's been a long week, I apologize. The communities over by like the Pizza Hut and Taco Time, where there's a lot of shake roofs and potential wood fencing in there. So we have a report from 2017 that basically outlines the risky areas for wildfire, and it also has recommendations. And that's where when we employed that GOAT program a couple of years ago, it was totally where we put those goats was derivative from this report in terms of strategic placement of them. So in terms of ideas that we have, there are things on the go and obviously reports that we can leverage to make sure that we're maintaining our situational awareness and implementing where we can.
Last question then, in regards to funding for any type of a break, I take it we would likely be in line for provincial funding to assist in developing that. And if that is all the case, will we be looking at the development of a break anytime soon?
The specific dollars that we're looking at are actually federal. They're from the Disaster Mitigation Adaptation Fund. So it's basically tied to the adaptation, taking into consideration climate change and other things around that in terms of our local context. I don't believe we'll be getting an application in this year, and what we'll have to anticipate for is if this grant is available in future years. It's not something that is consistent. It looks like it's about every 2 years. And, at this point, we're supporting a different project through the grant that I think the city could see a lot of mitigation support of as well. And at the same time, while this is a great plan in terms of the fire break, there's a lot more to work out in terms of costing and everything in terms of with inflation and, the cost sharing between that federal grant and what the city would have to kick in. There's a lot more that we need to figure out before that happens. So I'd like to see this potentially at the next opportunity it's available, whether it's next year or in 2 years. And a lot of that work that is required for that application should be underway just through normal day-to-day operations.
Good. Well, please keep council advised.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Acting Mayor Parker?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Palmer, for you and your team for what you're not only doing in our community, but what you're doing up north. It's greatly appreciated. We're in the presence, well, not presence, but there's a letter that's been sent to us from a citizen in regards to some of the issues you talked about and all that. And there's been a bit of back and forth over the last year, and I think one of my colleagues can probably understand where I'm coming from in this. And there's some valid points here in regards to not so much the lots, the individual lots in the tight areas, but in the peripheral areas where the city is a developer, but I don't know so much the city's a developer, but Melcor is a developer, but the city also has lands on the outskirts as well. And you're talking, have you guys done a full assessment? I want to make sure we have this on the record, a full assessment, and are we going to do anything, or do you think everything is good right now as status quo? In regards to a fire hazard, an example in the Sunridge Canyons area.
Yeah, and absolutely, as mentioned, wildfire remains to be our #1 risk, Councillor Parker. And I think there is validity into what's been submitted. In terms, but we have to address the context within there at the same time. From our perspective, we were looking to roll out an entirely new hazard risk vulnerability assessment program. In the past, this has been done entirely internally with who we believe have been subject experts in administration. The approach we wanted to take in 2019 was actually including community members, so longstanding citizens who know the area, business owners in the area, and we're actually going to do different segments of the city having their own. We're growing so much, so the west side could have its own assessment, the north side and certain other communities that might be more high risk, versus what we currently have is an entire city risk assessment, which is, in my opinion, slowly becoming less relevant just based on our growth. So what our goal is, again, to move to a little bit more niche specific in terms of geographics, a different audience in terms of input to get these the data that's going to identify what level of risk there is. Unfortunately, we had this ready to go, and then COVID unfortunately happened, and we've been slowly playing catch up. But I believe this is one of our pertinent projects that we need to get off the ground. It is supported by the 2017 fire mitigation report that the fire department had commissioned by way of the Fire Smart grant. I also think that some of the research that we had last year was in terms of some of the land use and land development. We'd like to explore more Fire Smart initiatives in the community. Things like in Calgary, for instance, you need to have a certain number of trees on your property strategically placed where it's not a risk to your home. And right now, that's not something in place. So on top of determining the level of risk for the area in the city, we also need to beef up some of our legislative pieces through bylaw or policy that kind of advocate further to personal onus and making sure your property is also protected in terms of the risk that you're currently living in.
And thank you for that. And it's timely that, with the fires that are happening up north. And of course, this conversation always starts up when there's a westerly wind and there's a fire that comes off. We've seen it near Colehurst a few years ago. And I remember one time it was getting closer and closer. It actually jumped the river and it was heading towards West Lethbridge. And I can't remember, that was 7 or 8 years ago. But anyway, it all blends together. But are you going to have some kind of report? I know you guys want to get this going and all that. What can we tell this citizen in particular? Can we, and I don't know if yourself or Carly through Community Services, are we going to tell them that we are putting a report together, do an assessment to work with these areas and understanding each geographic location is different? Does this individual know that who sent this letter? And since it's public record, this is the letter that Mr. Chinner has sent us. Has your department spoken to Mr. Chinner at all? And I don't know if that's Carly or Mr. Palmer that can answer that.
I can kind of speak on both. So I believe I spoke with, and we've had a couple of calls very similar to this at the same time. And unfortunately, I without some notes that I have back in the city, I can't verify it. But I do believe that I did speak to this individual because I know a lot of their concerns were related to some fire response type things, and I wanted to make sure that the fire department was tagged in. So I do know that a conversation did happen between Mr. Chinner and the Fire Prevention Bureau within Lethbridge Fire Emergency Services. And as far as I am aware, that is where I directed them when I spoke to them, just based on some of the questions that Mr. Chinner did have. In terms of that first question, if he's aware, we mentioned it briefly when I spoke to him, and if it's the same individual I'm suspecting I spoke to. But what I can also share is that the Municipal Emergency Management Plan for the city is publicly available. Although with the update to the city website, I need to verify its exact location. But one of the appendices in there, I believe it's Appendix D, actually details our hazard risk vulnerability profile. So outlines our top 40 risks. It classifies the risk level associated with them. So that initial data is available. We'd like to take it to the next step where it's, geographical focused on the city. Like if you live in this area, this is your exact kind of risk profile in conjunction with the overall city one. So it is available. It is a legislative component for our municipal emergency management plan. So it is there, and we've done our best to try to make what we can share publicly. We're working our best to make sure it is available, and that is one document that we have shared through that plan online.
Thank you. And I have to have follow. So you just said it in a real way that I could understand. Did you have this? Did Mr. Chinner hear that kind of idea as well from you, or was it something? Is he privy to that same information you just gave us in this meeting?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, because I just looked at the letter from May 8th, so it's just a few days ago. So I want to make sure. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Do we have any members of the audience that have any questions or would like to speak to this? Oh, Councillor Campbell.
Oh, I'm just changing subjects if I could, or do you want to keep on this particular subject? I mean, it's related to, it's
Is it related to
report.
this? Yes.
It's related to the
Oh,
report.
go ahead.
And it's totally changing subjects, Mr. Palmer, and thanks
Perfect.
for what you're doing here. I was intrigued by, under the risk management and some of the things that are coming up and the concern with AI right now. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that and how worried should we be? Or can you, I mean, is this going to be a real issue going forward, do you think, in your world?
That's something that is quite interesting in the entire emergency management profession. I can't give you a definitive answer just because I think a lot of it is unknown. And from what we've seen, the trend is it continues to change. 1 week, you've got a website that you can basically type in, write an email to my friend inviting them to a birthday party. To the next day, an app is developed for it. At the same time, the ability for these programs to garner information and learn from one another or learn from what people are inputting is pretty incredible. It's a very advanced search engine from what we've understood, but again, it's the data collection. And again, just knowing where that is in terms of cloud data is if it's domestic or if it's international. I can share that there's a lot of value in terms of emergency management being moved over to the risk and controls group within Treasury and Financial Services here with cybersecurity, just so we can kind of take this from a group effort in terms of understanding this, just because it is so dynamic. There's no industry best practice in terms of how AI is coming in, and some concerns in terms of the ability to deep fake and more advanced Photoshop opportunities. So things like identity theft and plagiarism obviously are the easy low-lying fruit indicators that could happen. But at this point, it's very preliminary in the details we know. And at this point, what we know is that it's absorbing information and it can cause challenges. And we're just hoping it doesn't land in the wrong hands. But we know at some point there's going to be a malicious use that is identified. And we're hoping cybersecurity professionals are able to get on top of that before and kind of advise us on that. And at the same time, grateful to have that within my own team to leverage that information from.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I know it's early on, but I just was curious your take on it. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Deputy Mayor Middleton Hope.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just another question or follow up, I guess, to Councillor Campbell's comments. We're talking about the Chat GPT. Is that what we're talking about, Luke?
Yes.
Yeah, so the application from an educational perspective has already had a significant impact where we're identifying young people who have and put them into essay research proposals and so forth. Do you see a potential impact, whether it's an incursion into one of our database systems or something along those lines?
So I think I got the most of it there, but I can share that my my connection kind of froze a couple times there, so that's why my camera's off to hopefully save some bandwidth. But I did hear kind of that the university system and the school system with everything else.
Yeah.
In terms of the follow-up after that, I apologize. Are you able to ask again, Councilor Middleton Hope?
Yeah, sure. It's just in terms of the potential impact that we're recognizing from a city perspective. What kinds of risks are we being exposed to? And I know Councillor Campbell kind of started this question off, but I'd like to kind of finish off and hear what your thoughts are in terms of are we identifying potential threats to the city in terms of accessing data or anything along those lines?
I think this is it speaks to the value in our annual cybersecurity training to educate our staff on the risks, because yeah, you're completely correct that could happen. We're seeing a high level of phishing emails, vishing, smishing, basically any of the ishings that are associated with cybersecurity. And these are where and even LinkedIn, people are trying to take advantage where they're trying to learn your organizational traits and things about you and come off as I'm here to help you with sales item A. and things like that. So, I think the big thing is, in the past, sometimes it was really easy to notice that these were fake emails. You'd see spelling mistakes, improper use of grammar, and things like that. With ChatGPT, it's going to take care of that. It's going to be a high level email coming out that, for somebody who's not aware of the risks in the cyber world, they might act upon that. And that is concerning, but it's nice that we do have that control in place through our mandatory, training here in the city. It goes a long way. I can share that there's a lot of things that I wasn't aware of until I did that training, but certainly is seeing its value even further with the presence of ChatGPT, just because it's so much easier to appear normal and hook people in on getting that data.
Yeah, so you're working with our IT section then in regards to managing any potential threats. You're aware of any of the challenges that we're facing. I can think in terms of, trying to access city documentation to get a leg up on a proposal of perhaps the acquisition of land or something of that nature. So you're working directly with IT to ensure that those levels are frustrated?
Yes, working with IT, but by way of the cybersecurity manager, who is also in risk and controls with me. So it's, leaning on their subject matter expertise and supporting where we're required and applicable.
Good. Are you comfortable with where we are right now?
I am. I think, again, it's the most difficult area to keep up on. It's ever changing, but at the same time, I think the city has dedicated resources that really allow us to maintain that high level view of it, and we can assess those types of risks, and of course see, how we're managing that initial risk, and of course the residual on the side, because I think this is something that is not preventable. It's something that we have to mitigate, and how we do that right now is really good. Obviously we're going to have to adjust on the go, just that's the nature of the business, but that's also our field, so we're a little bit used to it. And again, we've got a lot of good expertise here in the city to assist with us. So I currently do feel comfortable, and I feel comfortable that we'll be able to adjust as things change.
How about reportability? Are you finding an increase? Are you finding what number of employees are reporting any kind of activity that they find is suspicious? So in other words, the strategies that we're utilizing and the educational component, is it being effective?
I can't share what if it's fully across the city that way. By way of what I've heard through cybersecurity, who really monitors that, the phishing action button that we have in our Outlook is very much utilized. I'm pretty sure the uptake is high, and I can verify and come back to you with that information. From a personal perspective, I've certainly seen an increase in my use of that reporting system.
Good. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions at all? All right, seeing no questions, I have a motion here from Councillor Campbell. Read the Spring 2023 Spring Hazard Report. Be it resolved that the Community Safety Standing Policy Committee recommends that City Council receive the 2023 Spring Hazard Report as information. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to Mr. Palmer for the information. Always good to hear how things are going in his world, so I appreciate that. And if there's any other questions, I will ask to call for the vote.
Question's been called. All in favor? That carries. Thanks very much, everyone. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.